people in Siberia and Mongolia are an incredibly hardy people. And I'm speaking from personal experience because I've taken 3 trips to Mongolia and 1 trip all around through Siberia, right? And so when I was there, I saw the resilience inside these people. And I went to stay with the Mongolian reindeer shamans. Yeah, I know, I'm bragging, it's true. It was such a privilege. And I went to stay with the reindeer nomads. And it was a long trek, you know, I had to get to Mongolia, to Ulaanbaatar. And then from Ulaanbaatar, I had to take a bus all the way up to the north of the country. And from the north of the country, that I had to find people that would get me into a 4-wheel drive that would take me past where the roads ended. And then when we got to the end of that, then there was a guide that, you know, took us in horses up over this massive big mountain pass and then down into the summer residence, like the spring and summer camp of these reindeer nomads. And they're the mob that populated the New World, I believe, because while most of the Mongolians are in yurts, the Tartan, the reindeer nomads, they're in teepees, right? And so there was this exquisite little hidden valley that I came down to on my horse. And then there's these teepees everywhere with reindeers all around, like tame, like looked after reindeers. And seeing a reindeer is like seeing a unicorn. It's just incredible. And then the people, these nomadic people, imagine a romanticized vision of all of this, and that's what it looked like, right? And it was in a beautiful environment. But those people, these kids, they have these chorchies, they have these chubby little cheeks, and they're so rosy, right? And they're so rosy. And you think, it's so healthy, you know, such healthy mob. You don't see those rosy cheeks anymore. They're so rosy because in winter, it gets to minus 42 degrees and they're living in teepees, right? And the blood vessels actually just burst in their cheeks, and that's why their cheeks are so rosy. And so you imagine how hardy these people are, right? They are tough, right? These are some tough people. I could regale you with stories, but they're resilient, right? And in order to improve their resilience, those mob turn to this herb, Rhodiola, right? And whilst I'm on my travel story brags, right? This Rhodiola here is not Rhodiola that I ordered from some organic supplier. This is Rhodiola that was gathered in the mountains by a Siberian man, actually a man from the People's Republic of Tuva, right? Just in the same neck of the woods, on the border of Kazakhstan and Mongolia and China. And he gathered it in the mountains, and he'd come down, and I was at a gathering of shamans. I know. And there was all of these like proper shamans, not like shamans you get around my neck of the woods. I mean, multiple generation shamans dressed with all the things, and they're all converging there. And somehow through the connections of these things, I'd been invited to come and speak and share what I knew at this festival. And so I'm there, and this guy, this little dude, this wild mountain man who, you know, I don't know, he came up to my nipples or something. It's a little mountain goat came down, and he was just there, and he's laid out a blanket, and he had this beautiful herb laid out on it. And I immediately got my attention, and I got down, I had a look, and I was just like, oh my God, is that Rhodiola? And then there was someone there who was able to translate, and it's Rhodiola, right? And then I had a taste of it to confirm, and it was Rhodiola. And so this is the Rhodiola that I've got tincturing here, that I got in Mongolia. And so that means this is Siberian and Mongolian resilience in a liquid, right? It's incredible. So you want to think about that image that I told you of those hardy people, and then you want use that as the image for this herb, right? Rhodiola. Think of Siberian or Mongolian nomads in the winter in that part of the world. And yeah, right now I'm drinking my rhodiola because it's one of the central ingredients in my Shaolin coffee that I have every day, sometimes twice a day if it's a hard day. And so it's there instead of coffee in this instance to, along with cordyceps mushrooms and ginseng and a range of reishi and all these other sorts of things and dandelion and goodness for resilience, right? Instead of coffee. And so what are the properties of rhodiola? I think it's an adaptogen, and you already know that, right? So it's similar to ginseng and cordyceps and maca and ashwagandha in a whole range of ways. How in ways that it's going to modulate the stress response. It does a great thing for the adrenals and cortisol. It's going to have this non-specific effect upon your health. It's going to improve like wound healing and recovery from accidents and stress and all this stuff that all of those adaptogens do, right? Help us to adapt to the world, right? And so how is it unique? Well, there's a couple of ways in which it's unique. One of them is its flavor, right? And so it has a flavor that is unlike any of the other adaptogens. And let me just see if I can confirm this for you here. Oh God, that's so good. So it's, wow, I'm just taken back to that gorgeous little valley where I was. So the flavor is, like a range of them, there's a sweetness, right? So there's a sweetness in there. And that sweetness, like sweet is like full sweet, deep sweet, not the sweet of lollies and Coca-Cola, but the sweet that we find in herbs, the sweetness that's there in ginseng, for example, the sweetness that's there in angelica. That sweetness has a building, anabolic, strengthening action to it, right? And so a lot of tonics, herbs governed by Jupiter, we could say in our astro-herbal language, have this building quality to it, a strengthening quality to it, whilst bitter drains and detoxifies, right, as well as other things as well. Then sweetness builds, right? So all of those, most of those adaptogens have a sweet element inside them, and rhodiola has that, right? So there's a sweetness, like maca. Maca is so sweet. But there's a second note in it that's not in any of the other adaptogens that spring to mind at present, and that's astringency. Right, and so astringency is like strong black tea, and so it causes like proteins to come together, right? So you use tannins to tan leather, right? And so if these are all the sort of the proteins there, then astringency goes and draws them together and sort of makes the water come out of them. It feels like, so you put in your mouth something astringent and you get sort of puckering, not like sour, not just like that, completely different to sour. It takes the moisture away, and sour will bring saliva into the mouth, and it draws together, it firms up boundaries, right? It firms up the boundary around every cell. That's what astringency does. It maintains a boundary between things, right? It has a drying quality, not a moistening, not a yin quality, not a pungent heating quality, a drying quality, and that firms boundaries, right? And so we can see that one of the archetypal forces inside rhodiola is that it is like a solar panel for this force of astringency, this boundary affirming difference between you and me, right? And so water dissolves boundaries, fluidness, succulence, herbs that are succulent and emollient, and they soften boundaries, right? And astringency firms and maintains boundaries. And so you can't hear this language about what it does on cells and proteins and leather and boots and not translate that to psyche, right? So there's a boundary maintaining quality there, right? Beautiful. And that's like other herbs that we have like that, like oak, right? And so there's an element of oak. You know, oak, strong like oak, the oak barrels, the great oak trees, the great oak doors, you know, all of this sort of stuff. Like it's a sacred to Zeus and Thor, and it's this oldest, strongest, biggest tree in the forest, and all of that goodness. And we use it to, you know, when tissues and people and issues alike, tissues and issues and people are slumping and soggy, right? We don't give them more succulence like aloe vera and marshmallow and slippery elm. Instead, we want to like straighten your spine, son, and astringents straighten the spine in that regard. They maintain the sense of I-ness, of boundaries, right? So it's a solar panel that captures up that divine force that's there, right? About boundaries. And that's that boundary aspect of it. If the sweetness is Jupiterian, then the astringency is Saturnian. There's a Saturnian quality to the boundary informing astringency that's inside rhodiola. So it does this wonderful thing like that. It's just like, you know, and you can imagine someone's older military father and what they're sort of wanting for their Gen Z non-binary son in some way, and what they want is astringency. You know, the astringency, they have the astringency of a judge, that old general in this way, and it's just like straighten up and fly right, son. It's just like, here, have some rhodiola. Right? Have some oak bark, have some tannins, right? So that's one of the aspects of them. Now, it's not the totality of this herb. Obviously, there's all of these effects upon consciousness. And so in the Shaolin coffee, then the rhodiola is increasing electrical activity in the brain, and also enhancing the way in which dopamine is taken up by cells, right? So there's dopaminergic qualities to rhodiola as well, right? But that increasing electrical activity of the brain is very different to ginkgo biloba, which improves the permeability of the blood-brain barrier and increases circulation to the brain, moves the blood to the brain. That's fantastic. This one increases the electrical activity in the brain. It moves the subtle winds of consciousness through the brain, the manasrotas, the channels of mind in Ayurveda, right? And gets the brain firing. And so whilst, like all the other adaptogens, rhodiola is going to improve physical endurance. And so you could test this with those awful drowning swim stress tests that they do on rats and see how long they can last in that situation before they start to go under with rhodiola and without rhodiola. And you see all of that, physical endurance. But really, they all do that. They all have an improvement on physical endurance. And so that's good, but it's not special about rhodiola. The special thing is about mental endurance. So rhodiola also just helps, you know, if your mind is going to mush, it draws it back together, right? It draws it in the same thing that does to the spine, straighten up, right? That boundary piece. Then it's sort of like the mushy brain firms back up, right? Like this, and you have better mental endurance. So for study and for stress and for work, right? So there's incredible mental marathons, right? You could use this like ginseng for a physical marathon, but you can use it for a mental marathon, and it's the one that stands out for me for mental marathons. And the 21st century is nothing but if not a mental marathon. But it's also a key herb in one of my central formulas, which is the 7 Treasures of the Earth, these capsules, right? There's also a 7 Treasures elixir. And 7 Treasures of the Earth is a combination of herbs that nourish the earth energy within, right? So it's grounding and it affects the gut brain, right? Rather than the kidneys, rather than the adrenals, the kidney qi in Chinese medicine, the adrenals, then rhodiola also affects the spleen qi in Chinese medicine. And Chinese medicine has used rhodiola for a very long time. So has Greek medicine, so have the Vikings. The Vikings used rhodiola for increased virility, fertility, and stamina and endurance, right? All of these things. And Dioscorides, I think, in the Greek tradition, first documented rhodiola. Rhodiola rosaceae, because when it's fresh cut like this one was, you can smell this rose-like quality. And roses are a gentle astringent as well, right? There's a firming astringency inside rose. So it's a root with this golden root is another one of its names, right? Golden root, because it's got this color to it. Not a yellow color, but a rosy kind of color. And because it's just precious like gold. So in 7 Treasures of the Earth, then I've put together a series of herbs that nourish the earth element inside, and that nourish when somebody is exhausted and fatigued. One of the main differential diagnosis points is, do they need adrenal style adaptogens, right? Or do they need gut brain style adaptogens? And in the gut brain style, when that person may also have candida, that person may have brain fog, they may have grain brain, they may have loose mucous membranes, they a bit of stuff in the back of the throat, they may have loose stool, they may have flatulence, they are going to have fatigue, but also mental fatigue. This is a picture, that is the picture of spleen yang deficiency and spleen qi deficiency in Chinese medicine, which is a deficiency of the earth, of the central mountain inside, right? An erosion of that central pillar of support. And that central mountain in some ways is the rest and digest parasympathetic function, right? Where all of these things happen. And it should be like the vagal nerve is this axis mundi, this pillar of strength within us. And rhodiola astringes and firms the vagal nerve. So it puts backbone into you, right? That straighten up and fly right, son piece, right? Astringes, non-literally, this is not a literal statement, but it astringes and firms vagal tone. And the vagal nerve is what goes down from the tongue, through the tongue, you know, so it gets innervated by all the flavors, and then goes into the heart and the viscera and the guts and all of these things down there, and is central to the parasympathetic nervous response. So that's the earth part, right? And so in this formula as well, then there's other herbs. I'll just run you past them so in case you're curious. One, there's 24 karat gold leaf in there. Yeah, and because that is perfect for all of this, it's warming and good. There's Korean ginseng, which also tonifies the spleen qi. And there's the rhodiola, organic angelica, a beautiful herb that does that from the west, from the Sami people. Organic astragalus, and then there's some digestive support. Nutmeg, great for the mind, great for the spirit, great for stress, great for psyche, great for the digestion, great for fertility, and a small amount of wormwood, right? Just a really little bit of that bitterness to get the bitter tonics inside that. And so it's a digestive gut brain formula, and central in that is rhodiola, right? So rhodiola is firming up all that is soggy and boggy within you, right? All that's just kind of like wishy-washy, you know, moldy, lax and collapsed and prolapsed, right? And actual prolapses are treated with these kinds of strategies in Chinese medicine, right? So actual hernias and prolapses use this category of strengthen the upright rising qi of the earth, of the spleen qi, of the central mountain, right? And rhodiola is one of these, right? So it's exquisite. It's an exquisite herb. And that's what you see. If we go back to those people, when you think rhodiola for resilience, right? Rhodiola for resilience. And that resilience is, yes, it increases electrical activity in the brain, but it's a grounded, earthed, embodied resilience that gives the hardy autonomy and independence of spirit that is, you can imagine, is necessary for those Siberian folk and those Mongolian folk over there, right? That they must be autonomous. They must have a good boundary between themselves and the environment, right? A good boundary, like, so that they're not dying of cold and exposure, right? But they also must have resilience so that they can withstand the many, many trials and tribulations. And for me, I see that encapsulated so beautifully in this herb. And I hope that through describing to you these ways that I use it in my formulas, in Shaolin Coffee, and in two formulas called Seven Treasures Elixir and Seven Treasures Capsules, the Seven Treasures of the Earth, that in those formulas, that's how I address that pattern, right? All of those things. And you can bank on rhodiola. It can make sensitive Vata folk because of the bitterness and the stimulating nature of it, what it does to dopamine, what it does to electrical activity in the brain. Some sensitive folk will get just way too jittery off this, right? And so we have to be careful with that. They're going to need ashwagandha, completely different picture, tired and wired. Give them ashwagandha. But for someone that's just swampy and boggy, right? With a foggy, swampy, moldy inner state, then rhodiola. Give it a try, sweet friends.